Hi, my name's Daryl, and I'm the owner of this beautiful 2020 Bikini Blue Jeep Wrangler. And I've only owned this thing for about 4 days, and I just love it. I always really wanted a Wrangler because of the open air feeling. And I live in Las Vegas, and so it's March, the start of March, and it's beautiful. And I really want to take the hard top off and get that total open air experience. But before I do that, I need to have some place to store it. And so today, we're actually going to modify my garage, and I'm going to have just a little bit of kind of a manual lift system to store my hardtop. And if you're own a Wrangler and you want to do something similar, then maybe you want to check this out. All right, so the supplies that we're going to need for this, we've got these screw eyes that I got from Home Depot. So these are the size of them. These are basically going to be installed in the ceiling of my garage, and they're also going to be installed on some 2x4s that I'll show you in just a second. We have these kind of cam buckle tie downs, and this is what's going to connect actually to the fisheyes as well as the 2x4s, the fisheyes on the 2x4. We have this little guy, which is a stud finder, so we need to find the studs actually in our ceiling of our garage. We have some zip ties, and finally, we have some 2x4s. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing that we really need to do is measure our hardtop, and I did this previously, but basically it's 66 inches in length. We have approximately 60 inches in length, so 5 feet. Okay, so the width of our hardtop was 60 inches. The 2x4 that I got was 8 feet, and then I had it cut down to 6 feet, so that's 72 inches. And basically I installed the cam buckles basically, or the fisheyes, 3 inches basically from each side, and I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, so that will give us basically 66 inches between the buckles or between the fisheyes. And so that gives us a little bit of play when we actually put that underneath the hardtop. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually park my Jeep how I would normally park it into the garage. And basically, we're actually going to be parking underneath the suspended hardtop. And so you really want to park it where you're comfortable, and then basically place the fisheyes up in the ceiling so that that hardtop is then centered on where you would normally park. And so let's go ahead and park, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Then what you're going to want to do is place the 2x4s basically centered on the Jeep. And coincidentally, the 2x4 is actually the exact width pretty much of the Jeep and the tires. Yeah, so basically now I've laid down the 2x4 and it's basically centered on the Jeep. And then basically you want to take about 3 inches or so 3 inches from this point likely, and 3 inches from this point over here, and then you basically want to kind of draw a straight line almost up to your ceiling, and then put basically marks on your ceiling where you want your fish eyes to go. Now before you put your fish eyes up on the ceiling, you really got to get up there and use your stud finder to find the exact center of the stud. Now, if you look at my ceiling, for example, I don't know if you can see it, but you can kind of see where the studs, you can see some of the kind of the nails that go into the studs from the drywall. But still, even though I could kind of see where the studs were and where the marks were, I think it was important for me to use a stud finder to actually get the direct center. So let me show you that real quick. Yeah, so I'm going to use this Ryobi stud finder. I basically just got everything at Home Depot. You know, I don't think this is any better than any of the others. It successfully found the studs for me, and so I think it was like, I don't know, maybe 24 bucks or something like that. So yeah, it works pretty good. But let me show you getting in the center of the stud. Yeah, so the way this Ryobi works, it's kind of one-hand operation. So you will basically use your left thumb to turn the on button on, and you need to calibrate it. So basically you just have it somewhere where there's not a stud, and then you turn it on. And then you basically just move it slowly, and then it will start lighting up. And then once it gets to the middle of the stud, there you go, it'll tell you it's actually the middle of the stud, and then you can basically just mark that point. All right, so the next thing we need to do is just drill a little pilot hole for our screw eyes, so it's not so hard to get into the stud. So go ahead and do that. Now after we got our pilot hole done, we're basically going to take our screw eye and we're going to screw that in to the stud. Couple more to go. Yeah, so when I was initially kind of making my marks in the ceiling, one thing that made it easier for me is I put marks on my 2x4s. So I made a mark 3 inches in, and then I made another mark on this other side 3 inches in, and then I basically lined it up with that first kind of mark, and that made it real easy for me to figure out where that second mark was. It helps to have a kind of a helper marking you, but if you get kind of centered on the 2x4, it does make it a little bit easier. And so that's just kind of a little hint. It'd probably be helpful if it wasn't so heavy. Okay, so my studs are actually 24 inches apart. And so instead of actually just doing 2 of the fish eyes, I'm actually going to do 3 of the fish eyes. 2 of the fish eyes I'm going to use basically to suspend kind of like the lower part of the hardtop. And the last fish eye I'm actually going to use to suspend the upper portion of the hardtop. And I'll show you well, I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work. Just kind of playing it by ear, but hopefully it'll turn out great. So let me continue. Yeah, so this is what it looks like with the fish eyes installed into the ceiling of my garage. And so we got them into the studs, and they're all nicely lined up. And they are 24 inches apart. So I've got a total of 48 inches. And once again, the top was actually 60 inches long. So I've got about 12 inches of play. And I actually bought 3 of the 2x4s. I think it'd be better to suspend the top by the 2x4 as opposed to actually suspending it from the hook. But in reality, I'm not sure. I just wanted to, they're only $4 a piece, so I just wanted to kind of play it safe so I don't have to go back to the Home Depot. And so we'll see. I'm gonna go ahead and put 2 more fish eyes in 2 of the 2x4s. Yeah, then we're gonna get to take the top off. And so that might actually be a separate video on taking the top off, but it's gonna be part of this one. And then we're gonna try to suspend it, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so this is my first, I think I told you, this is my first mod on the Wrangler. And I guess this really isn't really a mod, but you know, you don't see very many Wranglers with the top off. You see some 2 doors with the top off, but very rarely do you see the 4 doors with the top off. And yeah, that's what Wranglers are really made for. So yeah, we're gonna do that today. All right, so our next step is we're going to put the fish eyes into our 2x4s, which are going to be used to suspend the Wrangler top. So if you remember, we basically went 3 inches in from where the fish eyes would be located, and we did the same thing up in the ceiling just to kind of match it up so it would be hanging nice and straight. So we're going to measure 3 inches basically on the 2x4, and we're going to try to put this basically at 3 inches. And try to put it in the center as much as possible. And then you're going to drill a pilot hole. Okay, and then you're going to install the fisheye into your 2x4. And you can use the little screwdriver trick to get it in there. All right, we'll do the other side. Okay, one subtle change that I made to my design. After I installed the eye hooks, because the studs in the ceiling were only 2 feet apart, I really didn't feel like I had them spaced apart appropriately. Now, I watched a couple of other YouTube videos on this issue, and some folks actually installed another 2x4 beam right on top of the existing studs. And then I saw somebody else that actually used the same eye hooks that I had installed, and they basically put a bar across the eye hooks, which gave them a lot of flexibility in where they hang the top from. And so that's what I decided to do. So I went to Home Depot. I basically got some rebar that was 6 feet by, I think, a ½ inch. And yeah, that went across my eye hooks perfectly. And so now I've got really good flexibility on where I hang it from. And so I think that's going to help me a lot. So the next thing we have to do is we have to remove the hardware, attaching the hardtop to the frame of the Jeep. And then after we do that, we're going to go ahead and pull it in and then remove the top and see how easy or hard that's going to be. So the first step in removing our hardtop is we have to take the freedom panels off. So there's basically these latches right here. And I'm sure everybody's already done this before, but you basically remove the latches, and then there's basically 3 little turn, I don't even know what they're called, brackets that hold that hardtop in place. And so you basically turn those. And then you can remove the freedom panel. So yeah, the freedom panels are a little awkward and a little bit heavy. They actually give you a bag for you to store them in. And so if you are going to keep them in place for long-term storage, I would suggest that you use that bag. Now, the way I'm actually going to run without my hardtop is I'm actually going to keep the freedom panels on. It's basically kind of a free bikini top. It keeps the wind noise down and it keeps you out of the sun, but still you've got that kind of open air experience. And so that's how I'm going to actually run with my hardtop off. So the next thing that you're going to need to do is remove 8 of these Torx 50 bolts. You're going to use the Torx 50 head that comes with your Jeep kit, and you can actually use the wrench, the ratchet wrench if you want to. I've got this power ratchet that I'm going to use instead that will make it just a little bit quicker. But you remove, this is the top of the hard top, close to the driver side, and then there's another one basically over on the other side that you would then remove. And then we have 6 additional that secure the hard top to the frame. So let's go ahead and get that done. All right, so now we have 3 bolts on the left side and 3 bolts on the right side that we have to remove. Yeah, so my power ratchet actually doesn't fit all that well in there, so I get to use my Jeep toolkit. So to access the storage, you just open this, and this one says roof, and so then you want to put your bolts in there. We're all set. Oh, so the one thing I almost forgot about is you have electric connector that goes to the wipers, and that's right here. And then you also have the little hose that goes to wash the windshield wiper, and that hose is actually right here. You're going to have a little silver button that you're going to depress on the hose to release that, and then that red tab, you just basically push in on the red tab to release it and then pull it down. First time you take it off, it's actually kind of difficult, but you push the silver button on this tab, and then just that comes out real easily. And let's just put that to the side temporarily. And then this tab right here, you want to push down with your thumb, and then you want to pull down and kind of push in on it a little bit, because there's a tab that kind of holds it right there. And if you push just a little bit on it, then it'll make it a little bit easier to release. So push on that tab, push forward, and then pull down. And of course, if you have both hands, it does make it just a little bit easier. But there it goes, it comes out. Now Jeep also gives you a nice convenient place to store these items. And so you take your little electrical connector here and you fit that down into here. We take that and we basically put it in that slot, so that secures it. And then you take your little tube right here, and then your tube basically goes right in here. Oh yeah, I forgot how this routes. And so you basically take your tube and you wrap it around, so it's nice and neat. And then you just push on this to get it into that slot. And so there it is, kind of nice and neatly put away. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is just back up the Jeep into the garage, and then we're going to attempt to get the hardtop off. Wish me luck. All right, so before we actually take the top off, I was trying to do this myself, and I ran into some trouble. I ended up having to get my wife to help me to kind of take it and move the top off, because you've got this big spare tire in the way, and it just makes it difficult to lift it and move it all the way to that 2x4. So one of the things you might want to consider doing is actually taking the spare tire off. Now, you don't have to, you know, maybe with some practice, you wouldn't need to, but it'll take you about 5 minutes or so to get the spare tire off. And so I think it's well worth your while to go ahead and do that. This spare tire is a little interesting anyway, so it's probably good if you haven't done this before to do it. So you basically have a camera cover right here, and then you have a T40. Basically, it's not really a bolt, it's just kind of a lock and unlock. So to unlock it, you turn it to the right or clockwise, and to lock it again, you turn it back to the left or counterclockwise. You're going to use your T40, and you can use your toolkit for this. And you're going to see a little tab down here that will kind of slide down. So you turn that, and you will see it slide down. And then you can pull it off. And so now this is off. When you're ready to put this back on again, you just put it back on and you go counterclockwise. So the next thing we're going to do is you're going to grab the lug nut wrench from the back of your Jeep. So the lug nut wrench and the actual jack sits underneath your location where your bits are. all the bolts are for taking off the top and, you know, all taking off the doors and all that stuff. So it just sits right underneath that. And there's basically 3 lug nuts that you basically just have to remove. So we'll do that real quick. If you have, you know, some sort of a impact wrench or something like that, of course, it would make this a lot easier. So probably like 3 minutes or so to do that. Not much. All right, so our next step is to basically hang the hooks and then put the 2x4, the back one, onto that hook. So let's go ahead and do that. Now where I set my 2x4 height above the ground is basically to match up sort of with the body of the Jeep. And so, but I do want it to be a good amount above the body of the Jeep, because as you're driving up to it and driving away with the top off, you have the sound bar or the speakers in the roll bar, and it lifts up a little bit. And so you need to have some clearance, and you want to just give yourself some play. So basically, if you kind of measure from the ground to basically the top of the tub, you're probably looking at about 50 inches or so, maybe a little less than that. But basically, I set the height of my 2x4 where it's going to rest. I set that at approximately 52.5 inches. Now, I tried to make it 52.5 inches on both sides. That way it's sitting nice and level. But just to make sure, you can get a leveler out and then just put it up on your 2x4, basically just to make sure that it's actually level, so your top, you know, kind of isn't hanging at any sort of angle. You really want it to sit relatively straight on the 2x4s, and so that should be perfect. Now, the next hooks that we're going to put in place in the ceiling on my rebar is basically the hooks for the other 2x4. Now, we won't be initially using that 2x4 until we get a little bit farther in the process. I'll show you that. And where I positioned mine was just past that first hook. So right here. And while we're at it, we might as well go ahead and put the other hook up. And this hook will be basically for the body, the kind of like the body panel. I'll show you that. We're going to use that basically to kind of position the top. So the first hook will be for our 2x4. And our next hook will not have a 2x4 on it. Now we're going to want to do the same thing on this one. Is basically we want to have it at about 52 inches and we want to have it level. So we want the whole top to be level from left to right and also level from front to back. Okay, so I'm going to measure that just to make sure that it's the same as this other one. So the top of this one right here is approximately just exactly 52.5 inches. And so we want the same on this side. And that's actually a little low, so it's sitting at 52. So we're going to want to raise these up a little bit so that it's equal. Well, nope, I raised it up too high. So yeah, I'm going to play around, get it just right, and I'll be back. All right, so both Both 2x4s are at 52.5 inches and they're both dead level. So we should be good on that. Now we can actually take this 2x4 off and then we're going to back up the Jeep.
On the roof, medium fashion drama.
All right, so now we're getting close to lifting the top off the Jeep. First thing we need to do, you see this hook on top of the rebar. We're actually going to use this hook down here and we're going to use it to lift the very top portion of the cover. But before we do that, what we're going to want to do is actually take this hook on the rebar and we want to move it back just a little bit. And the reason why we want to do that is because as we take the top and we lift it and we move it backwards, if it's nice and tight right here and it swings this way, it's going to want to swing back. So just to give yourself a little play, you want to move that hook back just a little bit. And that's why actually by using this rebar, it actually makes this process just a little bit easier. Then what we're going to want to do is you need to take this hook and you need to attach it to this part of the hardtop and you're going to lift it up. So I like to use just like a little bit of foam on that portion of the hardtop. And so when I open it up, you're going to see that there is a little bit of a curved portion right here. You see that curved portion? And that's where we're going to lift from. So I'm going to give myself a little slack here. Okay, and I'm going to put my foam in there, and I'm going to put my hook in there. A little more slack. Okay, then what I want to do is lift up. And as I'm lifting, I actually want to lift this part of the hardtop. That'll make it a little bit easier for me to lift it. And you can see that this portion of the hardtop, it's not that heavy. The heavy portion of it is in the back where the glass is. So we want to lift this thing up probably a good 6 or 7 inches because we do have the speakers right here. And the speakers, as you're moving the hardtop backwards, the speakers will actually get in the way. And they'll get stuck, so you won't be able to move it back. So you want to move it up probably about 7 or 8 inches or so. I'm going to put it right about there, and I think that's probably about right. So once we've got that set, now we're going to do the other side, basically the same exact way. I'm going to take the hook, and I'm going to slide it back a little bit. Okay, did that. Now here's the hook, and here's where I want to position him. I'm going to put some foam, once again, onto the hardtop. And I don't know if you can see, but there's actually, it's already lifted a little bit on this side, so that's good. And you can see how light it is because that other side is already being lifted. So I put the hook on here, and then once again, I want to lift up. And as I'm lifting, I'm going to basically pull it. And I want to get weight onto that strap. Okay, so that's pretty high on both sides. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so you can see that that's pretty high on both sides, that clearance. And you can kind of see that little, I think you can see that little kind of thing that actually fits into the to the body again, once again. But what happens is that thing will hit these little speakers and that'll stop you. But I think that's enough clearance right there where we should be fine. All right, so our next step is basically just to lift the top up, lift it up on top of these 2x4s. And so once it's resting on both of the 2x4s and suspended on the hooks, then we should be good to drive the Jeep out. And then our last step is basically to get those last 2x4s underneath the other part of the hardtop suspended, and then we should be good to go. So I find this just a little bit easier from inside of the Jeep to lift up and push. So we lift, And we put it on top of the 2x4s. Okay, then we're good. So now we just want to kind of double check just to make sure that it looks like we have all the clearance that we need basically to pull the Jeep out. And so we've got, you know, the roll bar here, we're good. We've got the speakers. We got plenty of room over the top of that. So basically we're good to go. So at this point, I'm gonna drive the Jeep out underneath the top, and then we'll put that last 2x4 in place and we're done. As you're pulling out, you probably just wanna look back just to make sure nothing is getting hung up. All right, so basically the last step is to take this last 2x4 and put it on those other 2 hooks that we put in place, and we're done. So we'll get this one first. And we'll put the other one in place. So it's not resting on the 2x4s right now, and so I just want to release the tension out of the hooks, basically. I'm not going to relieve all the tension out of the hooks because I actually want the 2x4s suspending, both 2x4s suspending the top, as well as the hooks are kind of like just in case something bad happens with the 2x4s. But we'll go ahead and release a little bit of the tension on the hooks. Okay, release a little bit of this tension on this hook strap. And we have successfully suspended our hardtop. Now, probably as the last thing you want to do is just make sure that equals amounts of tension is sitting on all of the 2x4s as well as all the hooks. So everything should, at this point, should be nice and tight. So I'll just check that. So there's a good amount of tension on this one. I don't think I really have to do anything with this one at all. It's nice and tight. This one right here is also nice and tight. This one right here is a little loose. So I'll just lift up, put a little tension on it. This one right here is also a little loose, so I'll put a little tension on this one. And let's check the last one here. That's a good amount of tension on this last one. So basically at this point, everything has a nice amount of tension on it, an equal amount of tension on it. Make sure that your 2x4s are solidly resting underneath. And finally, just to kind of button things up just a little bit more, you could use some tie wraps and basically kind of go around the holes in the hardtop and then put it around the 2x4 to further kind of secure it. But I actually am pretty confident of what we did here, that it ain't going nowhere. So I gotta tell you, I really enjoyed this project, and it's just so useful. And it's so inexpensive. Basically buy a couple of 2x4s, some hooks in the ceiling, some straps and some rebar, and that's really all you need. Now, it does take a little bit of time, a couple hours of your time, but be able to take that top off and put it on whenever you want to. And also the fact that it doesn't take up any storage anywhere, yeah, it just makes it so easy to do that. And just look at this Wrangler. Look how great it looks with the top off. That's how Wranglers are really meant to be. I'm lucky, I live in Las Vegas, and so I can do this a lot. But yeah, that bikini pearl, this teal color with the black, it's just so amazing. So if you enjoyed this video, please like it, and I've got a lot of content coming up. So I've got a whole series on soft tops. I'm going to look at various soft tops that are available. I'm going to give you kind of what my recommendation is for my particular case, but I'll give you the pros and cons of each one. Then I'll make suggestions on how to get a good used one and how to get a good price and to stay safe. Finally, once you got that soft top, I'm going to show you how to install it. I also have another series coming up on towing, multiple videos on towing with your Wrangler. So if that sounds interesting to you, maybe you want to watch some of those, consider subscribing to my channel. And yep, I hope to see you in the next one again very soon.